name is Casey Garcia from Mount San Antonio College, and I will be talking to you briefly about two events in the interpland. The first of which we will be discussing is poetry interpretation. Poetry interpretation, you can do it either of two ways. First of all, you have to do literature that is within the genre of poetry. Very nice. You're already learning. You can do it one of two ways. One, you can do just one long poem that lasts up to 10 minutes with the intro already in there. Or you can do a program of poetry centered around a theme that you choose with your coach's guidance or something that moves you personally, and then you go research and find a group of poems that fit that one theme. And that's pretty much all I want to say. We'll move on to the example poetry that we have today. We are going to have Miss Rachel Resnik from LA Valley College, who is a bronze medalist at Fire Road High and a gold medalist at the California Community College Forensics Associate State Championship. Please welcome Rachel Resnik.
The blood of a million innocents is being shed in the name of fat cat oil contracts across the globe, while children are being burned alive in the Congo, and ethnic genocide is the politics du jour in Eastern Europe. At home, our workers can't find work, our teachers can't afford to teach, our senior citizens are being left to die like pigs in the nation's hospitals, while insurance company executives fatten their wallets. The deficits are soaring. The bombs are exploding. The ozone is being ripped into tiny little pieces. And it is all because of Janet Jackson's titty. The breast, reported in November 8, 2005 Los Angeles Times, is political. Women belonging to the protest group Breasts Not Bombs were arrested and faced criminal charges as sex offenders simply for showing their breasts. The following poetry program demonstrates the hypocrisy behind vilifying the breast when there are much bigger problems in the world. Culprit by Andy Buck, an open letter to John Ashcroft, Attorney General of the United States, and Ad Nippolim by Miriam Reiner. A poetry program on the politics of the breast. Note, on January 28, 2002, Attorney General John Ashcroft announced that he spent $8,000 of taxpayers' money for drapes to cover up the exposed breasts of the Spirit of Justice. An 18-foot aluminum statue of a woman that stands in the Hall of Justice. John. You've got your priorities all wrong. While men fly airplanes into skyscrapers, dive bomb the Pentagon, steal kids on school buses, take little girls from their beds at night. While we live in the threat of biological warfare, nuclear destruction, annihilation, you are out buying yardage to save Americans from the appalling, alarming, abominable aluminum alloy of evil. That terrible 10-foot tin titty. You might not be able to find Bin Laden, but you sure as hell found the hooter in the Hall of Justice. I have a nipple. Two, actually. I don't have a third superfluous nipple like Chandler. But wouldn't that be cool? I want it right on the tip of my nose. So every time I sneeze, milk would shoot out of it. But you won't ever see my nipples. It's not that I don't want to show you. It's that I can't. I'm not supposed to. If I took out my nipple, I could go to jail. For a nipple. I could be fined millions of dollars for a piece of flesh that looks like an eraser. An eraser with milk. My nipple someday will keep a child alive, but I have to cut cover it while feeding that child? Out of fear of what? Out of others looking and being offended at that little piece of flesh? Listen up. Janet Jackson's titty is filled with mad cow disease, and at nighttime she sneaks into all of the McDonald's and squirts into the McSecret McSauce. Janet Jackson's titty drank most of the chocolate milk straight from the carton, and I say most, because Janet Jackson's titty left just enough delicious chocolate milk in the bottom to drive you fucking nuts. Janet Jackson's titty is the reason your daughter's knocked up, your son is in jail, your wife is fucking the gardener, and your husband can't get it out. Janet Jackson's titty is the product of affirmative action, and if it weren't for reverse titty racism, her titty would have gone into law school. Janet Jackson's titty tore down the rainforest, the World Trade Center, and your hope for a better tomorrow. Janet Jackson's titty, quite frankly, is the reason everything is going so horribly wrong. It's not that we aren't grateful. But while we are begging the women of Afghanistan to not cover up their faces, you are begging your staff members to just cover up that nipple. To save Americans from that monstrous metal memory. How can we ever thank you? So in your office every morning, in your secret prayer meeting, while an American woman is sexually assaulted every 6 seconds, while American sons arrive home in body bags and heat-seeking missiles fly around foreign countries looking for any warm body, you think of another body, and you pray for the biggest bra in the world, John, because you see that breast on the spirit of justice, in the spirit of your own inhibited sexuality. And when we women, our mothers, our grandmothers, our daughters, our granddaughters, our sisters, ourselves, when we women see that statue, the spirit of justice, we see the spirit of strength, the spirit of survival. Do you know why men have nipples? Well, at one point, we all start to develop as women. Nipples form. But then some fetuses start to turn into men. You know, it's just the hypocrisy that gets me. Why are men allowed to show their nipples? They have fake, false, pointless, hapless nipples and can show them. Mine are real, and I can't. You know, I bet at that game where Miss Jackson took out her nipple, there were guys who had their shirts off and even made it on TV. They didn't get fined or put to shame. My nipples don't even have hair. At least not anymore. Well, every day we view innocent bodies being dragged out of rubble, and women and children being laid out and baptized into death as collateral damage. And the hollow-eyed Afghani mother's milk has dried up underneath her burqa. In famine, in shame, and her children are dead at her breast. While you look at that breast, John, that jug on the spirit of justice, and deal with your thoughts of lust and sex and nakedness, we see it as a testimony to motherhood. And you see it as a tit. Oh, it is not the money it costs, it's the message you send. We've got the right to drop bombs night and day on a small country that has no army, no navy, no military at all, because we got the right to bear arms. Oh, but we just better not even think about the right to bear breasts. So now, John, you can stand there and be photographed while you talk about guns and bombs and poisons, without that breast appearing over your right shoulder, without that bodacious bosom bothering you. And we just wanted to tell you, in the spirit of justice, in the spirit of truth, John, there is still one very big boob left standing there in that picture. But there is hope. Come, join me, compadres. Grab pitchforks from the barn and let's hunt down Janet Jackson's titty like the filthy, depraved fierce monster it is. And when Janet Jackson's titty begs for our mercy, as it surely will, we shall say, No. No, Janet Jackson's titty. You shall not transform our children into titty-loving hipsters. You shall not transform our old people into jitterbug dancing maniacs. They're old, and they should rest. Say goodbye, Janet Jackson's titty, because this is the US of A, and we don't take kindly to your type of titty round here. I once sat on a park bench to breastfeed. Across from a bench that had a homeless man on it. I smiled and told him I'd buy him lunch when I was done. A woman, completely oblivious to this sad, pathetic countryman, told me to stop. I was offending her. Lady, you offended me. Give that man $10 and then I'll stop. She didn't. And I didn't. Get away from me, my child, and my breast.
Things to point out. There's she obviously did 3 poems and she interwove them. And when you do that, you can either do 1 poem at a time, back to back, or you can interweave them where you constantly come back to the poetry throughout. If you do that, the beautiful thing that she did was the poems need to be talking to each other. They need to be building off each other. You can't just decide to stop one and start the other one. They have to have a certain flow to them. So you almost have to construct, through puzzle pieces, a program that kind of talks its way through. And that was very well done in her program. Another great thing that Rachel did was that she composed a program that had both very funny moments and very, very serious, poignant moments. And she went back and forth, up and down, and that is called having levels throughout the performance. If you stay at any one level for way too long, if you keep it intense for 9.5 minutes, you might lose someone along the way because it's just too much. Of course, the other point is if you keep it light the entire time, then the message that she conveyed in the intro might get lost somewhere in that humor. Questions pertaining to Rachel's wonderfully constructed food poetry? Yes, sir.
Why the book?
Why the book, Rachel?
See if I can go back to speech 101. I believe the book is there to just convey the message to the audience that, it's just to show that the piece of literature is there. Although I'm not reading directly from it, it's kind of a symbol to show that I don't know if it's giving respect or just showing that the piece is there, that I'm, performing about it. Maybe.
You're acknowledging that it is a piece of literature and that you yourself are paying some type of tribute to it, that you didn't write it on your own, that you are doing published people's work. And oral interpretation is all about paying respect and acknowledging that piece of work. Yes, Chris?
Where did you find your poetry?
Where did I find my poetry?
Yes.
Last I checked, it was the coach's job to do that. But my former coach, I know how sometimes when they help you an insert piece, they try to piece it toward the way you are. And this piece had the multiple pieces had sarcastic humor, serious, as far as funny. That kind of goes with my personality. I don't know if so much the boot part does, but it worked for me as well as my coaches. So does that answer your question?
One of the other good things about interpretation, it might not be good for some of you, you get a lot of leeway with what you can say within the literature because it's not really you saying those things. It is part of the literature. So some of you might think that her program is a little too racy. Some of you might have thought it was too tame. But the good thing is that it is literature, and this is, in my opinion, well written and a very good theme. It was a very metaphorical kind of program. spoke to issues that are very current and contemporary right now. Yes, ma'am.
So I noticed nothing like necessarily rhyme. So how do you distinguish like poetry from like, oh, it's prose? Can someone just say, okay, this is poetry?
It has to be, well, it has to be published as poetry if it is published. If it is not published, then the author, whomever that might be, must state or acknowledge that it is poetry. The beautiful poetic imagery that was used throughout her program gave a lot of credence to that. Not all poetry has to rhyme all the time. Do you understand? No rhyme. Okay? But most of the contemporary poetry right now is all about free verse. And some of the stuff that's in slam poetry does have a tendency to have a more melodic, rhythmic type of movement. Unfortunately, the pace at which she performed wasn't the slam style, but there was some slam poetry in there, which is good. Yes, sir?
How is slam poetry working on the circuit?
It's very well accepted. Most of the slam poetry, I would have to say, is the one that is on the cutting edge. It's taking the big issues, most of it. Some of it is very humorous and light. But it's always a good thing to, for no other reason, to visit poetry, slam poetry, to maybe even get an idea for a program. Any other question? Yes, Stephanie?
How would you perform poetry differently for forensics than you would a slam?
Have you ever been to a slam?
I haven't. Never been.
Okay. Slam poetry, actually, to tell you the truth, has anybody ever been to a slam poetry competition? Wonderful. Some of them actually have their text with them still. I've seen competitions in Austin, Texas, where some of the poets still have their little notebooks that have this stuff. But most of it is much more into the microphone, and the speed is a lot faster because they have a 3-minute time limit for each of their poems. So it's like trying to get out all of the debaters. It's spreading. They try to spread in 3 minutes as much poem as they can get out. A lot of images. I'm done. And then they get their like 9.9 or whatever. So it's much more spastic, I would say, slam poetry is. Back to Rachel. Any last minute questions? Thank you, Miss Rachel.